The sun was sinking low behind the red hills of the Texas plains, spilling long, bleeding streaks of fire across the open land. Dust rose with every step, swirling like restless ghosts over the parched earth. Miles from any town, the old ranch sat quiet, half swallowed by the wild. For years it had been home to one man, Elias Trent, a rancher who'd lost more than most men could bear. His wife had died of fever 2 winters ago, and his only son had gone chasing gold in California, leaving him behind with a few cattle, the wind, and his loneliness. Each evening he'd ride the fence line alone, talking to the stars as if they might answer back. But that night something changed in the silence, something breathing, moving in the brush. Elias dismounted, his hand instinctively resting on his revolver. The rustling came again, sharper this time, closer, followed by the faintest sound, a groan half-choked by pain. He raised his lantern toward the sound, squinting through the dust and shadows, and there she was. At first he thought she was a ghost. Her skin glowed bronze in the lantern light, streaked with dirt and blood, her black hair tangled and matted with dust. She lay in the grass, clutching her leg, an arrow broken off near her thigh. Elias's breath caught. The markings, the beads, the feathers, she was Comanche. A warrior, maybe a scout? Every rancher in these parts had heard stories. Raids, ambushes, vengeance. But this woman wasn't raiding anything. She was dying. For a long moment Elias stood still, torn between fear and something deeper, something that whispered of mercy. Then with a steadying breath he stepped forward. "Don't move," he said quietly. The woman's eyes snapped open, wild, alert, full of fire. In an instant she reached for the knife strapped to her waist, but Elias was faster. He grabbed her wrist, firm but careful. And in that frozen second everything went silent except for their breathing. Her chest rose and fell fast, her gaze locked on his, fierce as a trapped hawk. Then through cracked lips she whispered, "Don't move." Elias froze. The voice wasn't weak, it carried command. She jerked her chin toward the ground near his boot. He followed her eyes and saw it. A rattlesnake coiled and ready to strike. Its tail buzzed like dry bones in the wind. Elias didn't breathe. He could feel the sweat slide down his neck, his grip tightening unconsciously on her wrist. Slowly, she reached into the dirt with her free hand, fingers closing around a rock. Her eyes never left his. One heartbeat, two, then she hurled the stone. It struck true. The snake's head cracked, its body writhing once before falling still. Only then did Elias exhale, releasing her wrist gently. For a moment they both just sat there, the danger gone, the silence between them heavy and strange. "You saved me," he muttered. She didn't answer, just pressed her hand back against her bleeding leg. Elias knelt down beside her, inspecting the wound. The arrow was jagged, barbed. Pulled out wrong, it could kill her. "You'll die if I leave you here," he said. She glared at him as if daring him to try anything foolish. "Better die free," she rasped. "Than be prisoner." Her words hit like stones. Elias shook his head. "You won't die here, not on my land." Before she could protest, he lifted her into his arms. She was light, but the blood soaked through his shirt before he'd gone 10 steps. Her head rested against his shoulder, and even as she slipped into unconsciousness, her fingers still gripped the hilt of her knife. Back at the ranch house, Elias laid her on his bed and worked through the night, cleaning the wound with whiskey, heating his old knife to cauterize it. The smell of burned flesh filled the room, and she screamed once, a sharp, piercing sound that echoed through the lonely house. But she didn't cry. Her eyes stayed locked on his, teeth clenched, breath ragged. He saw it then, the strength, the pride, the warrior's heart that refused to break. When it was done, he covered her with his wool blanket and sat beside her until dawn. By morning, the fever had set in. She tossed and muttered words in Comanche, sometimes reaching for weapons that weren't there. Elias stayed by her side, wiping sweat from her brow, whispering, "You're safe here." He didn't even know her name. Days passed and the ranch began to change. Where once the wind had been his only companion, now the house breathed with quiet life. The sound of her shallow breaths, the scrape of her knife against wood when she regained strength. She began to eat again, silent and wary, her eyes following him wherever he went. Elias noticed her studying everything, the way he cared for his horses, the rhythm of his work, the way he never locked the door. One night he found her outside, standing beneath the moonlight with his blanket around her shoulders, staring toward the horizon. "Why did you save me?" she asked without turning. Elias hesitated. Because I've lost too much already. She turned then, and for the first time he saw something softer in her eyes. My people. They don't forgive easily, she said. They think all white men bring death. Elias looked down. They wouldn't be wrong to think that. For a long moment, neither spoke. The stars above seemed endless, the night stretching between two souls who should have been enemies but weren't anymore. Over the following weeks, the ranch began to heal along with her. Elias learned her name was Ayana, meaning eternal blossom. She had been a scout for her band when soldiers attacked without warning. She'd escaped but been wounded, left behind when her horse bolted. I thought I would die, she said one evening, her voice low, the fire casting gold on her face. Elias poked at the embers, his heart heavy. Maybe we both were, he murmured. They grew close, not through words, but through the quiet work of survival. She helped mend fences, gathered water, and taught him how to track storms before they hit. In return, he showed her how to gentle a horse with nothing but patience. There was laughter again, rare but real, echoing through the canyon. Sometimes at dusk she'd hum an old Comanche song, and he'd close his eyes feeling something in his chest stir back to life, something he'd thought had died with his wife. But peace doesn't last long on the frontier. One morning Elias spotted dust on the horizon. Riders. 6 men, armed, their coats bearing the insignia of the U.S. cavalry. They rode straight to his gate. Their leader, a tall captain with cold eyes, dismounted and said, "We're tracking a fugitive. A Comanche woman wounded. You seen anyone?" Elias's heart pounded, but his face stayed calm. "Ain't seen a soul in days," he lied. The captain studied him, then glanced toward the barn. "Mind if we take a look around?" Elias's jaw tightened. "You're on private land, Captain." The man smirked. "Private don't mean much out here, rancher." Before Elias could answer, Ayana appeared at the doorway, her hair loose, eyes blazing. The soldiers froze. For a moment, no one moved. Then Elias stepped forward, his voice cold as steel. "She's under my protection." The captain laughed. "Your protection?" "She's a savage." Elias's hand went to his gun. "You'll leave now," he said. The tension hung like lightning in the air. The captain sneered, motioning to his men, but Ayana stepped forward. "Enough," she said, her voice clear. "If you kill him, you'll have to kill me too." The words cut through the air like a blade. For the first time, Elias saw fear flicker in the captain's eyes, not of her knife, but of the fire behind her words. Slowly, reluctantly, he signaled his men to leave. The riders turned back toward the hills, their dust fading into the distance. When they were gone, Elias turned to her. "You didn't have to." She pressed her hand to his chest. "You saved me," she said softly. "Now we are even." But they both knew that wasn't true. Some debts couldn't be measured. Weeks later, the rains came. The red hills turned green again, and the river swelled with new life. Ayana stood beside him on the porch one evening, watching the sun sink behind the wet horizon. "What now?" Elias asked. She smiled faintly. "Now we live." Her hand brushed his, light as wind. He looked at her, and for the first time in years, he didn't feel alone. That night, as the fire burned low and thunder rumbled in the distance, Elias thought about how life had twisted 2 lost souls into crossing paths. He thought about the moment she whispered, "Don't move," and realized it wasn't just a warning about a snake. It was a message from fate itself. Sometimes the hardest thing in life is learning when to stand still, when to let the world catch up, when to let your heart stop running. He reached across the table, taking her hand in his. Her fingers were strong, scarred, alive. She didn't pull away. "You think your people will come for you?" he asked quietly. She met his eyes. "Maybe, but if they do, they'll see I found peace." Elias smiled faintly. "Guess maybe I did too." Outside, the rain began to fall, soft, steady, cleansing the dust of old wounds from the land. The lonely rancher wasn't lonely anymore, and somewhere beyond the hills, the wind carried a whisper half Comanche, half prayer, that spoke of forgiveness, love, and the strange, wild grace of the frontier. And if you believe in stories that touch the soul, don't forget to subscribe for more powerful tales that keep the heart beating and the spirit alive.